In the previous introductory video, we looked at food and water use to get a preliminary sense of human resource extraction, production, use, and waste. Altogether, we can think of these throughput material processes as yielding impact. In other words, they have an impact on the environment, on the planet. Another term that is sometimes used is ecological footprint, and I'll discuss that in another video. For now, we're just going to focus on the notion of impact. There's a famous, although somewhat contested formula for measuring human impact known as the IPAT equation. And here it is. I for impact equals P, population, times A, affluence, times T, technology. Now, people often blame population growth for the problem of human impact exceeding the planet's ability to provide for human needs, and population certainly is a very significant factor. But what the IPAT formula suggests is that there is not a simple, straightforward correlation between size of population and the amount of impact, because if technology becomes more efficient, you might be able to reduce the amount of impact per person. Or if affluence, that is, material consumption, is low, a relatively high population may have a lower impact than a low population with a high level of affluence. Of course, it would depend on the population and the degree of consumption and so on, but you get the idea. There are also debates about whether this formula is too simplistic and whether the linearity of the formula fully captures the reality. But whatever its limitations, it is conceptually useful as a starting point. One other important to make here, affluence and technology, even though they have impact, are not necessarily bad things. Improvements in the quality of life are typically directly correlated with both of these. Thus, technology introduces public sanitation works, for example, which are fundamental to health and well-being, and that's a good thing. Technology introduces labor-saving machines, which dramatically alter, presumably improve, the quality of life. I have posted on the course Blackboard site a link to a video by Hans Rosling called The Magic Washing Machine for a simple but compelling analysis of the relationship between population and affluence, or quality of life, and technology. So affluence is typically understood as consumption, material consumption. So if you think about consumption, it involves the throughput of material stuff generated by the extraction materials to make a product, the energy and emissions associated with both the production and then the consumption, and followed by that the waste produced by product. For instance, if one drinks 3 servings of coffee per day, that would be consumption, the impact can be widely different depending on whether traditional china or plastic or paper cups are used. Maintaining china cups takes water and soap to wash them and a small flow of cups to replace breakage. If a person uses and discards polystyrene or waxed-lined paper cups, on the other hand, the material throughput includes all the cups used as well as the petroleum and chemicals needed to make the polystyrene and transport the cups to their point of use, and then their subsequent disposal. In the case of coffee cups, we can get a glimpse of their disposal as these pictures show. This picture shows a creation by a designer in Copenhagen, a coffee cup tube. That's that tube that says test tube on the side of the trash can, that was designed to reduce the unsightliness of the coffee cup disposal. By putting cups in the tube, the trash is compacted and thus is less ugly. The trash can pictures illustrate A, the amount of trash disposable coffee cups creates. It gives us just a rough idea of that. B, a solution to the unsightliness of the trash, but C, no solution to the amount of trash, which, as we've pointed out, would be one side of the sustainability question about the use of paper coffee cups. Now, some argue that technology will solve our problems, that what we really need to do is convert technology from destructive forms to green or non-harmful forms of technology. Let's call that technology 2. If technology could be non-harmful, maybe it could reduce the impact of population and affluence, and that's represented here by putting technology in the denominator position in the formula. So remember, the way to think about technology is that it includes all the material extraction and production processes required to produce material goods to generate throughput, as well as whatever technology is involved in managing the waste and the byproducts of products that are produced and used. But we also need to be careful here. You can't just remove technology from the numerator. Rather, the need for what we're calling technology 2 is not only as a substitute for technology, let's call it technology 1 that we traditionally use, but as a corrective to the impact already produced by technology 1 and which is likely to continue to be produced by it. There won't be a sudden wholesale replacement of technology 1 with technology 2. There are many entrenched dimensions to technology 1. Just think about having to replace all the gas stations with some alternative source of fuel. And many of the effects of technology 1 are long-lasting: carbon in the atmosphere, long-lasting pollution of water by mining, nuclear waste, and so on. So instead of only transforming and moving technology to the denominator, perhaps a better way of thinking about this is that technology 1, the destructive extractive technology of the Industrial Revolution, and which we're still more or less using, remains in the numerator, and alternative technologies are put in the denominator. Notice that this means that the effect of technology 2 would have to be greater in this way of thinking about it than in the previous in order to counteract the ongoing effects of technology 1 in the numerator. Now, some have argued that the IPAT equation should be supplemented to capture other drivers of impact. The author James Speth suggests that in addition to population, affluence, and technology, the following are additional drivers of impact. Number 4, poverty. Lacking resources, capital, and political and social power, the poor are often forced to behave and engage in environmentally degrading activities just to survive. If this is true, that would suggest that some improvement in affluence could actually improve impact. So many people suggest that the elimination or the reduction of poverty would actually improve the environmental degradation problem rather than make it worse, or it wouldn't necessarily make it worse. Market failure, another possible driver. For example, most market models do not incorporate environmental costs and externalities, and producers do not often bear the full and sometimes not any of the cost of pollution. Some of this failure is captured in the phenomenon known as the tragedy of the commons, which we will consider subsequently in the course. A sixth possible driver is policy and political failure. These are failures of regulation or monitoring and enforcement of regulation due to powerful economic, corporate, and political interests that are able to successfully lobby to water down or prevent altogether regulations or taxes on their activities, or it might involve corruption or other forms of political failure. The exemption of the oil and gas industry in the United States from EPA water safety regulations is an example of policy and political failure. It's one of the many contested issues, by the way, in the debates about hydrofracturing for natural gas. A seventh driver is the scale and global economic of the global economic enterprise and its phenomenally rapid expansion. One of the problems is that economic and corporate interests expand very rapidly, yet there tends to be a lag time, a delay, often 20 years or more, before the public and governments recognize and are able to respond to the problems that such expansion produces. An eighth driver, growth at all costs. We often find it difficult to grasp the nature of exponential growth and that even slow rates of change can compound rapidly. We also have a strong belief system in the positive value of growth and tend to underestimate its demand on ecosystem services, or what some people refer to as natural capital. Some people argue that we need to move away from the idea of growth, which suggests quantitative increase of material throughputs, that we need to move away from that quantitative idea of growth to the idea of qualitative development, which could involve dematerialization, in other words, using less stuff while at the same time improving quality of life. A ninth driver of impact might also be values and habits of thought, and Speth suggests two in particular: anthropocentrism and contempocentrism. Anthropocentrism is the belief that human beings can and should dominate nature, that human needs and concerns are more valuable than that of any other creature and more valuable than the ecosystem itself. So human beings are at the center, they come first, everything revolves, so to speak, around human beings. Contempocentrism is a habit of thought that discounts the future in favor of the present. Another way of putting this is to say that one values the future less than one values the present. We will come back to these issues when we start our reading specifically in ethics. Another analysis by Jared Diamond develops a 5-point framework for understanding why societies enter crises and collapse, and that his analysis includes, in number 5, values and habits of thought, but also the other 4 factors: environmental damage, in other words, that human activities produce that there's climate change, whether caused by human beings or not, and whether there are hostile neighbors or decreased support by friendly neighbors. Diamond is the author of the book Collapse, in which he develops this framework, and also of a very well-known book called Guns, Germs, and Steel, which I highly recommend for an analysis of the influence of geography on the differential development of nations in the world. There have been other influential and important analyses of some of the historical roots of our values and habits of thought. One very well-known analysis that was done by Lynn White Jr. in his 1967 article, The Historical Roots of Our Ecological Crisis, is posted on the course Blackboard site, and that'll be one of your assignments to read in the next week. White argues that Western European religious and moral beliefs are at the root of the problem, and he presents a very interesting analysis that I think you'll find provocative.